I drive my car up to the lake as if there's someone to awake. I haven't been to bed for days, I live in a twilight haze. And I set my heart to the setting sun, and I hope that no one else has done it. And the drinks are never far, open up the bar. I miss you every single day. I wait until it's not your way. I hate the way I'm straight.
If you're able to introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and because I've had a pretty good read of your website, and it's really interesting.
Cool, okay. So I'm Ashleigh Fechney and I trade as Ashleigh the Advocate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an employment law advocate, and I suppose what I'm probably most notable for at the moment is I'm representing in matters relating vaccination and employment.
Yep. Right. And one of the most curious things that I found on your website, and I'm going to read it out because I thought I enjoyed, I liked it so much. The fact that you have autism and ADHD, I believe the biggest barrier to success is the fear of failure. My perseverance in life has created a fearless advocate who isn't afraid to carve a new path. My disability is my ability, and my clients choose me because of this uniqueness. That is really refreshing to hear, and flipping it around and using it as a strength and not allowing yourself to be defined by it or, do the old victim thing or what have you.
Yeah, that's taken quite a long time for me to, I guess, get to know myself.
Yeah.
I actually was only diagnosed in ADHD last year.
Yeah.
So I'd always know that I was a bit different, I didn't really fit in. And so it was like when I got the diagnosis, it was kind of almost embracing. It was like, oh, this makes sense. And then I got diagnosed with ADHD and I was like, I think I'm something different. And then got the autism diagnosis and everything fell into place for me. Like, I've had people, they're like, I don't understand why you're doing this, actually, you're vaccinated, why are you taking these cases? And I'm like, you don't understand me, like, don't even try. And now I tell people, I'm like, I literally have been walking against the current my entire life because of just being different. And that makes me not afraid to take leaps and jumps and try new things. Which is kind of exciting because a lot of people, when I was employed, a lot of law firms, they don't want to take risks.
I see.
Whereas I just think the law's there to be played with.
So you're coming at it, you're right, you're coming at it from quite a unique perspective.
Yeah.
And potentially other lawyers or what have you might have to build up that skill. It may not come naturally to them.
Well, I mean, but then being a lawyer doesn't come naturally to me, right? So
no.
Because I started doing employment advocacy before being a lawyer. So just to break down the difference, essentially it's just I've got my law degree, I've been admitted to the bar, but I don't have a practicing certificate. And that's because in employment law you don't need one.
Yeah, I see.
When I was doing advocacy, someone said, actually, you're not lawyer material. I had no idea what that meant until I joined a law firm.
Right, I see.
And so when I went into self-employment, being an advocate, it kind of came naturally. And one of the first things someone said to me was, actually, don't call yourself Ashleigh the Advocate because you'll make it obvious you're not a lawyer. And I was like, but I want to make it obvious I'm not a lawyer. And now I get people call me and they'll say, I picked you, I've listened to you, I picked you because you're not a lawyer or you look different or you're...
Right.
I had one client say to me, it was the weirdest thing, she was like, I seen on your website you've got a picture of you with red lipstick on, and I thought if that girl could put red lipstick on that perfectly, she's going to be able to handle my case. I was like,
cool.
Okay.
That's awesome. Well, that's something that no one has ever said to me. So tell us a little bit about the cases that you've had and what they've been dealing with and your level of success and some of the things perhaps you discovered from them.
So at the moment I'm doing largely vaccination work, but I guess I've kind of been in the hot topic for the entire COVID response. I was really lucky, went into business last year in February and then COVID happened, and I originally thought, hey, I'm not going to make money. So I went onto one of those one of those business owner Facebook pages.
Yeah.
I said, Q&A guys, I'm going to give you all these employers advice. And then Radio New Zealand found me, and that sort of built my profile. So then in March, Radio New Zealand called me and said, Ashleigh, what do you think about vaccination policies?
Yep.
And I was like, oh gosh, I hadn't really thought about it, but just went back to basics. From there, everything just went crazy. So I've had a few cases. I've had the one against the New Zealand Customs Service, and that's been reported. It's going through to the employment court now, and with a QC. I've got one that was sort of successful, interim successful with Auckland International Airport. I've been to the High Court. I don't know. It's a whirlwind of things. What I like to focus on is process. So everything that I've been focusing on is stepping out and making sure that employers and employees know how that process works.
Yeah.
I haven't really been challenging the efficacy of the vaccine, and that is just because personally I am vaccinated.
Yeah.
I find that quite difficult for me to challenge when I am vaccinated, but there's enough there to say, well, do we need this policy? How are we doing it? Are we communicating with our employees?
Yeah.
And that's exactly how we got that interim success in the Auckland International Airport case.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine you would perhaps want to steer clear of that. I mean, I don't really know what's involved. I'm unvaccinated, and I've sort of been following it, with interest. But I see definitely a place for vaccinations, 100%. I've been following that Greater Barrington Declaration and the four-pronged approach, and what they call the focused protection of vulnerable people, and that to me made an awful lot more sense than this very broad, sweeping kind of actions that the government was kind of taking and sort of just catching everything in quite a kind of a clumsy manner and not looking at all of those sort of nuances.
I like to say we just put all our eggs in the vaccination basket.
Yeah.
And then we just keep pushing it.
Yes.
I think if you narrow down my representation, it's pro-choice. It's through and through. There's nothing else. It's a right, and that right's been limited. I don't believe it's justified.
Yeah.
And that's a matter that the courts will figure out later.
Yeah, that's right. And pro-choice, of course, that loves the fact that someone is able to take the vaccination and is able to get on board and
well, that's
take
the thing,
however many they want.
I actually got vaccinated because I am a vulnerable person.
Yep.
So that was an easy decision for me. It doesn't need to be fully effective because my immune system's just not great.
Yep.
But that I wouldn't expect someone else to get vaccinated for me. To me, that's really it's paternalistic, and it's almost disempowering by saying you're vulnerable and we're going to look after you and we're going to make everyone else get vaccinated for you.
Right.
When there are other mechanisms that can protect everyone.
Yeah, certainly that's one of those arguments, and I've had it mentioned to me. When someone finds out I'm unvaccinated, they say, "What about the vulnerable people?" And there's this kind of idea that possibly, I'm super selfish and I'm only thinking of myself and no one else. And obviously the posters are saying, protect Aotearoa, and things like that. It's not, so that narrative is definitely out there. And that's probably, to be fair, one of the biggest things that I've struggled with, just kind of mentally getting your head around it. It's almost like philosophy. I've
been really having to do that as well a lot in my narrative. The first thing we had to tackle was a team of 5 million.
Right.
So a lot of legal academics didn't write about any of the COVID response because they didn't want to be seen to be not part of that team of 5 million. Mm-hmm. And it took a very long time before we started actually critiquing the response. And that's our job. It doesn't matter whether or not we agree. And now it's that same idea of saying, well, you're selfish. And I turn around and I say, actually, these are people that are so terrified that they're potentially losing their jobs and their incomes, their security, their houses, their friends and family sometimes. That's not, to me, that's not selfish. That's someone that is so terrified or just unhappy. That to me just isn't selfish.
Yep.
And honestly, what to me is selfish is if someone like me, being a vulnerable person, were to say you need to be vaccinated because of me.
Oh, okay. Gee. Okay, right. Well, no one has said that to me.
And I think if you talk to a lot of vulnerable people themselves, you'd probably find that a lot of them don't want that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the other thing is about this is I don't feel like we have really, with the things that we have implemented, we haven't really successfully protected vulnerable people as well as we should have anyway. I feel a little bit nervous and worried if they have the opinion that it is a shield, like the vaccine is the big shield, and they are now sort of going along to the supermarkets and they have a sense of security and stuff like that. And I'm not implying that...
No, it's risk-taking, right? Like, I mean, those of us, I suppose, that are vulnerable with autoimmune conditions, we've always been vulnerable, right? So we've always had to take steps to... Like, I know that I get sick often, and so I take those steps on myself to make sure I'm avoiding that. It's no different. And I do the same now, even though I am vaccinated. I don't tend to go out as often as if I need to. At the moment, I'm pretty okay, but if there's ever quite a few cases, I just say to my husband, you've got a better immune system, you go and do it.
And certainly that is something I would probably do as well, I think. Like, one of the things that I've heard mentioned online and stuff is that COVID has sort of highlighted some of the... Milton's cleaning that bowl.
Sorry.
Nah, that's cool, Milton. It's highlighted weaknesses in business. Like, COVID has sort of highlighted weaknesses in business and in people's health. And so I've taken the opportunity to, buy myself a pair of running shoes and actually exercise for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So, I've kind of sort of seen an opportunity there, which, I can improve upon. But, so...
I almost actually look at it as well. Another way is the people that are most vulnerable. They've always been vulnerable, and it's really highlighting now a government failure, right? In my view, instead of all this money and process and put into mandatory vaccinations, why aren't we increasing our welfare or assisting that? Because a lot of the people that are vulnerable, they've also faced additional factors as a result of being low socioeconomic, so poor housing, not enough warmth, poor food, because they can't get nutrients. And it just compounds. And what I don't like is it's the government saying, well, it's all the personal responsibility, instead of the government saying, actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lift our standards of living for everyone, which should overall increase health. And if there is an outbreak, then the people that are vulnerable will give them extra support. And I know that a lot of people have never... Welfare systems are usually very controversial, but most people, if I said to them, well, would you rather that money for the vaccination get funneled into welfare and everyone's normal, most people would agree with it.
Oh, look, I mean, the government has a role to do, and that's right. I mean, there should be, there's so many different ways of addressing this pandemic as such. One of the things that I've seen recently with the people that I've been following, they've been sort of talking about Omicron in the sense that this is potentially a sign of we're coming more towards the end of the pandemic and more moving into the endemic stage, which I haven't really... I mean, I don't totally follow the mainstream media massively, but I haven't really seen that promoted. It's really, from what I can tell, has just been another opportunity to push another vaccine upon people. And
the thing is, is that now the people that are vaccinated are getting quite concerned about the number of boosters. And we are now at a point, it's a shame that everyone in New Zealand weren't looking at it a few months ago, but now there's a surprising amount of vaccinated people that are absolutely against it, because it's impacting everyone. If you think even, let's say, a local cafe, you've got to have, I don't know, signs up and door stuff and check everything, and that's even if you are operating with being vaccinated. Like, it's extra steps for everyone, and then it's more difficult. You've got to plan things. It's more risk, and it's your risk to take. I think people are now saying, actually, this is...
Do we want to live wearing masks for the rest of our lives?
You can't just keep ostracising people. It's not going to happen.
No.
Like, when I first started taking these cases, someone said to me, Ashleigh, why don't you just advise your clients to get vaccinated? And I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. I can say to them, if you don't get vaccinated, your employment will be terminated, and they figure that one out. But that's as far as I go, and my job then is just to go through process and make sure they were treated fairly. But I just can't... That is what I've been up against for months. It's just people saying to me, well, why don't they just get vaccinated? I'm like, we always knew there'd be a group of people that wouldn't. We should have planned for that. It's not enough to then just say we're going to put all these restrictions in, because there's always going to be people that aren't going to get vaccinated, and that's their right.
Well, I remember listening to the epidemiologists and virologists and stuff talking about even if we were at 100% vaccination level, the pandemic wouldn't go away because we can't vaccinate our way out of it. But it's an interesting kind of thing. Now, in regards to the new traffic light, what they call the traffic light system, or the protection framework. Now, I saw on your blog, and I read through one of the things, and then I got down to the conclusion, and it was just 4 words. And I was like, that's a very brief conclusion. But I liked it. It's all a mess. It's all a mess. So in that article you went over, you kind of broke it down into the masks and the distancing and the vaccine mandates and the different types of businesses and how they were sort of expected to
operate.
Yeah, operate.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
So how did you reach that conclusion?
So it starts a few months back in terms of it's a mess. Is a lot of people don't realise is when the government or Jacinda goes on TV and says this is what we're doing, that's all there is. You come to me for advice and I say I just saw the same thing on TV. I can't give you anything else. And unfortunately what they're doing is that's the status quo, and then 48 hours before that change is meant to be implemented, that's when they release the law. I got 48 hours to go through it.
And what does that look like? Like, explain to someone, because I never come across it. What is that? Is that like a 48 hours before it comes into practice? You get is that a 250-page document, or is it a 1-page PDF?
So it varies, but I guess I'll give a bit of a comparison, right? So normally laws go through the House of Representatives, it goes through like 1, 2, 3 readings, and it goes through a select committee, and there's a long time that people kind of see it in draft format and can see it change, and it gives the legal communities a lot of time to read it and see it and get some idea of why things are. But with these orders, it doesn't need to go through any of that process. All we do is like a website, the Gazette. It gets notified on there 48 hours beforehand, and that's all we have. Now, the vaccination order was quite relatively short, but the protections framework was like 118 clauses or something. It's quite significant. The problem, though, is even with the vaccination order, it may seem shorter. They've used a lot of terms that we don't use normally.
I see.
And that's been really difficult to interpret, because that's my job. It's not just reading it.
No.
It's also interpreting, and you've got to go back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
And so there's that part that's been creating a real mess, right? So what a lot of people, I guess, that are reading it in hindsight don't know. So that protection order framework came out on a Tuesday at about 9:30 p.m. at night. And I stayed up all night reading it, interpreting it. I wrote it a few different ways because I was like, okay, I need to get my head around this so that everyone else knows. And how I tell people it kind of reads, I wouldn't recommend looking at it yourself. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure story. Right. So what you've got is 118 clauses.
Which can be a lot of fun.
For the government. It's like 118 clauses of tools. It's tools in their toolbox that they can use.
Yes.
And then at the end, it's just like schedules that are green, orange, and red.
Right.
But because they can change this in a 48-hour period, there is no telling what might be at any time. We just know what there is at the moment. I've had to go through. And if I can't get my head around, like I tried, originally I had a proper conclusion. I was like, this is fine. And so I stayed up all night, released at like 8 o'clock in the morning, slept, and then slept again. And at 10 p.m. that night, they released an update.
Right.
Like, so not even 24 hours, they were already updating it. I woke up the next morning and I was like, I can't do this. Like, get it right the first time. And that's when I was like, nah, it's a mess. Like, if I can't keep on top of this.
So is that just a document online which automatically updates? You don't receive an email saying, hey, this has been updated?
Well, I think you can get updates, but they've never really worked for me. So I look on, there's a website called, I think it's pco.gov.nz, and you can see all the updated COVID legislation when it's coming through. But I have to continually refresh it and see what's happening. Because people don't understand, like, say, for example, the vaccinations order, I think that's on its 7th amendment at the moment.
I see, yeah.
So, and every time we go into a lockdown, well, previously, that was a new order. So there's a lot of these orders coming out that I've got to try and get on top of.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it's a mess is you think, well, again, if I've got 48 hours and I have got time to interpret it, good luck getting legal advice in that time.
Yeah.
And lawyers as well, they're really struggling to keep up. And there's a lot of liability if you are giving advice to an employer and it's not, completely correct. There is liability on you as a representative. And so that then puts employers saying, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't get legal advice, I have no idea, I can't read this thing. Because a lot of people read through the clauses and they're like, I don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, no, scroll to the bottom, like that, choose your own adventure. And it's not user friendly. If it was at least, if you're going to give someone 48 hours notice, at least make it readable to the people. Yeah. And the problem is that, well, the government do try to put a read along for it. They get it wrong. Like we saw with MBIE in the first instance, they said, well, it doesn't matter if you're operating with vaccination passes or not. In hospitality, everyone needs to be vaccinated. They just completely got it wrong. And then it took them about a week before they admitted it.
Yeah, I wondered about that. And the cynical part of me sort of thought it may be a case of putting out the most, the highest order, and sort of it might push X number of people towards getting vaccinated, because there it says in plain English on their website, hospitality workers must be vaccinated. There was no room.
Yeah, which is not what the legislation said either. It said if you're operating with vaccine certificates, then you must be vaccinated. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then it gradually, so then it sort of
changed.
Gradually changed. So sometimes I feel like it's that maximum impact, and then they back away from it a little bit.
Yeah.
So they sort of charge on right up to the line, and then they kind of pull their way back a bit.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that the government departments, however they're interpreting it, is not always how the government wrote it.
Yeah.
And that makes things really difficult, because I'll get people say to me, well, the Ministry of Health are saying that it applies to me, and I'm like, well, I've read it and it doesn't. And I put that argument forward, and then they'll be like, yeah, Ashleigh, you're right. And then later that night they've changed it. But you don't know where to look, you don't know who to trust, and there aren't enough representatives wanting to do this, because it's not easy.
Yeah,
and it's not
true.
easy just...
And like you say, if you give out the wrong information, you're liable.
Oh, honestly, I'm attacked for everything. Like, I've got the people that are vaccinated saying I'm doing a bad job, the people that aren't vaccinated saying I should be focusing more on one thing. Like, because I'm in the middle-ish, I get hate from everyone. Yeah.
Look, Ashleigh, if my first question was, do you like cats or dogs? And you said, I like dogs, 50% of the people would be like, switch off. and so I mean, I think we're always kind of walking that line, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, what I've always promoted, like, my goal was injustice. Is everyone deserves the right to legal representation. Everyone deserves legal advice and knowledge. It's not mine to keep, it's not mine to sell, and so it's always just been about making sure that people get that. A lawyer recently told me, and I really liked this, he said, it's always in my view, if there's no right to justice, then what's the point of the other rights? And he said, well, if there's no right to justice, we're moving closer to an authoritarian state. And that's always been the sentiment. I says, I understand the right to refuse medical treatment, but soon enough the courts are looking into imposing vaccine requirements into entering the courts. If you can't get to court to actually act on your right...
That's a major barrier. I mean, obviously you could perhaps do Skype or something, maybe, but I mean... But
it's still barriers, there's
that's
still
insane.
people that need to be in person, people with disabilities, and it's just not... I personally don't like it, and to me it also shows almost like a show of agreement.
Right.
Is that if the courts are going to say we're going to have vaccine passes to come in, then it's almost kind of them saying we agree they're lawful.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the court's position to take.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So when it comes... So what... Explain to me the process. So is it... I really don't know, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Like Jacinda and some of her top mates sort of get together, the top person of health, like Ashleigh Bloomfield and stuff, they will who actually sit down with a lawyer and they write this thing, and then the different areas of government, would they then receive a copy
really
of that and then they write their one?
That's really optimistic.
Oh,
I can't tell you what.
It's a wee bit like Britney Spears. Like, she doesn't write her own music.
I can't tell you what does happen, but I can say what is supposed to happen. So it's actually a lot less than that. It's the Minister of Health that is the overview, and I think the Minister of COVID Response, they can both make them. And essentially, so he needs to consider the purpose and make sure that the order is meeting the purpose.
Yes.
He needs to consult with Jacinda.
Yep.
He needs to, I think there's a Ministry of Justice he needs to consult with, and he needs to be satisfied that it doesn't unjustifiably limit the Bill of Rights. But it's just him. Right,
and then the different ministers in the different departments, do they then interpret it themselves, and they can obviously get him on the phone and say,
well, so hey. They don't even need to get it. Because he only needs to consult with the 2 or 3 people. He doesn't need to go out further than that. So, from the briefing papers I've seen, majority of the briefing papers are from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and the Ministry of Justice, which we, I guess, would expect. Yeah. But that's not to say that everyone gets it. And the thing is, a lot of our MPs, they don't get to see it before it comes out either, because it's all happening just behind closed doors. And even though I know Labor's got a majority and it'll go through anyway, but it would just be nice to have some challenge, even if they could drop it to the House maybe 24 hours beforehand to have a really quick debate on it, would be better than nothing. Yeah.
Gee. So, and like you were saying before, there's this tension and you're sort of trying to, just do your job basically and represent people and make sure they have a fair hearing. So, and you've been on this journey and you've discovered that there is misinformation out there, which makes your job even more difficult.
Yeah, especially when lawyers aren't stepping up and doing it either.
Yeah.
Like, they're not out there writing, and so it's just me saying that some of this information isn't right. And I don't blame people for wanting to believe it. They don't blame them. Everyone wants to find a way out, and everyone wants to find something, but some of the legal advice, what I try to tell people is, I'm like, it would crush me if there's businesses that have fought to stay over COVID and they've fought through the wage subsidy have to close over a $15,000 fine that you've gotten because you've taken this advice. Yeah. Whereas when there are safer ways of operating, and there's always a way to keep making money, that you don't have to just throw it all out there and open yourself up for liability.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's another interesting part of it, is like, how much do people want to, what is the role of their business? Is it to make money? Is it to represent their personal beliefs, or what kind of thing?
Well, that's it. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that know the risk and they're taking a stand. Yeah. And I'm like, that's great. But don't tell other businesses that it's safe to do so. Yeah. A lot of my job, and it's ironic, right, is my job is giving people enough information to make an informed decision. Right. But that is the exact same argument as what it is with what people want with the vaccine. But when I'm using it about legal information, I get slammed. And I recently had someone, when I wrote this legal misinformation blog post, just to try and get out, one, to the legal community to say, hey, this is what's going on, please help me. And secondly, to business owners and employees, and say, this is another view, do consider it. Yeah. And I posted it and I got told I was part of the problem and I'm ruining everything. And I was like, I've got the most amount of vaccine cases. I don't know if you can call me part of the problem. No. But I was like, hey, when you stop being a keyboard warrior and you go to the High Court, let me know how you get on.
Yeah. Far out. So what does the future hold? And the immediate future, do you feel like that with the new protection framework we've kind of settled down? Things have sort of settled down a bit? Or are there still going to be issues kind of popping up?
I think that there will always be issues. I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. I've been doing this for a while and it's been difficult trying to keep on top of everything. I think that now we've got a lot more of a stronger pushback against this particular order. And I think for one of the reasons is that it doesn't give us any hope. You think about, well, no one's in green, and even if you get to green, there's still restrictions. And it doesn't really give us any clarity about when we go through the levels. And people that's what we were promised and it's what we wanted. It will invariably be challenged, and then it will be for the High Court. So to break down how that process goes. So the Crown, being the government, have already admitted that this is a limitation on the right to refuse medical treatment. Now, a lot of people say, well, you still get to say no, so it's not gone. No, like the wording is a limitation. It just means that there is some kind of barrier imposed on that right.
Right.
The question for the court is that justified? But because there's been 7 amendments to the vaccination order, you think, well, first of all, they said border workers, justified. I think there's been midwives, there's been teachers. But now you're looking at basically majority of New Zealand. And there's going to be a level when it's not justified. And even if it's not found out at the High Court, I think that there will be further arguments through the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court.
Yeah.
A lot of people are quite cynical because the High Court have said that everything so far hasn't won. And I normally tell people, just to give them some hope and a gravity of how big this is so the vaccination order is an order in council. No country in the Commonwealth has ever struck down or just set aside an order in council. It's never happened. So if the High Court of New Zealand was to be the first, that's a big step. And so I don't blame them for being cautious.
Yeah.
Parliament have allowed that to happen, but I remain hopeful and optimistic that our Supreme Courts and our higher courts will give it a better go.
Right. Have you been following any other, like what's happening in any other countries? As far as this, like I'm thinking of America in particular. They love their freedoms, and they're certainly battling a lot of the mandates. Yeah. It seems, and once again, from what I can gather, the public opinion or possibly the business world seems to be swinging, and it started off very hard line, and now we're seeing some of the larger organisations kind of pulling away from those mandates.
Well, I haven't been following, I just don't have the time as much, but
I
do know what kind of laws are coming through, because one of the problems is with New Zealand legal industry not really stepping up and providing information is we're getting everything funneled from overseas, and that's really difficult because it doesn't apply. One big thing that people don't know, and it kind of frustrates me because I think it's a big deal in New Zealand, is that we are one of the only countries that actually have specifically the right to refuse medical treatment as separate to being the right to not be subject to medical experimentation. So over in America, their constitution, what they rely on, I think it's the right to life. Right. But we have a specific right. And to me, that makes it even more powerful. And that's why it's not even to say their laws don't apply because we're different, but we have this specific right. So whether or not you're on either side, that should say something. And I mean, a lot of it is the word mandate, right? So people will come to me and they'll be like, Ashleigh, it's a mandate, that's not a law, I've seen this thing, and I'm like, actually it's an order in council, it's not even a mandate. But it's just because of all this other information overseas flooding in, and they've got a lot more resources. But I do understand as well that America, I think Biden was operating a bit like Jacinda in the terms of he'll say something on TV and it doesn't quite make it to law. And that's causing problems. But I do think that there is getting a bit of a worldwide collective around understanding mandatory vaccinations and what we need them for and what's justifiable. Reading some of the legal scholars and in terms of high-level academic, at a most basic, at least academics are saying it needs to go through the House of Representatives. This is a limitation on our human rights. It needs to go through the people we have democratically elected. It needs to go through a process. We need to have a good framework for it. And even after, even our own scholars are writing this, the government still just keep putting it through as an order. Which is, it's quite hard, I think, for me to see, because then you don't get, say, the Human Rights Commission don't get to put their submissions in, the Law Society don't get to put their submissions in, all these other groups and independent groups and anyone don't get to have a voice. And if that's not democracy.
Man. So do you have is there a collective of like-minded people who are kind of getting together? Because one of the most valuable things I've noticed about this whole thing is originally when it all kind of kicked off, you're kind of sitting there quite insular and you're thinking and you've got your thoughts in your head and your immediate family and you're perhaps talking about it. And you don't, you're a bit wary about showing your cards to your neighbours and different people that you're friends with. But as it's kind of worn on, we've all become more accustomed about sharing what we think about it. And like you say, I've met heaps of vaccinated people that are kind of...
just uneasy?
Very passionate, almost more passionate than I am in their opposition to it, which is kind of strange because I haven't got vaccinated. But yeah, and especially when it comes to children as well, if they have chosen or they've begrudgingly got vaccinated themselves, they sort of say, I'm definitely not going to get my children vaccinated. So these conversations that, I just have on the street with people, there's an opportunity for you to have conversations and sort of wrestle and with the law and with the words and all of those different things so you can, you feel like you're making progress?
That's what I'm trying to do, is I am really trying to bring this down to a human level.
Yeah.
I think people tend to forget that the precedent we set today will follow us for future. And what concerns me is it's not just this pandemic, but what we are doing is we're giving the government this lawmaking power.
Yeah.
We did kind of have this during the earthquakes, but it was nowhere near to this extent. There was a lot more, I think, consultation with businesses, and it was also quite isolated. But what's next is potentially climate change. You're like, well, what are they going to make the people do with 48 hours notice to address it? And people aren't looking forward.
Yeah.
And that part's concerning. It's not about saying whether or not people should be vaccinated or not.
Yeah.
We're looking at each other instead of looking up.
Right.
And that part is quite difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, just seeing how people talk about each other. I had a problem back in July where one of these groups that are pro-choice, they wrote my name and number on a mailer and they posted it around New Zealand. And it was an informed decision or choice. I didn't give consent to it. I didn't know my name was going on it, and that was probably my biggest problem. And also because it purported me to be a lawyer and it purported me to be someone that could give advice on the medical aspect. Now, but as a result of that, I'm still getting calls now.
Yeah.
People the first one I got, it was almost close to midnight, calling me up and calling me a stupid bitch and telling me that.
Whoa.
And this is the thing, these are people very, I don't understand what goes through someone's head to think, I know what, I'm going to call her and call her a stupid bitch.
Yeah.
And then I get it on the other side. It's just really hard, and it's also, you're not, everyone deserves representation. I tend to tell people, I'm like, well, right now, you guys have more respect for lawyers that are representing murderers and pedophiles than what you do for me. Yeah. And this is just everyday people,
Is it? I guess there's just a lack of understanding, I suppose, a lack of awareness about your role and things.
When the media don't help too, they do really aggravate the situation. Yeah. And I think we're forgetting to look at people. I know that I've got clients that their children won't talk to them anymore, and they've got. I mean, it doesn't matter what the reason is, but, their children should understand their reason. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking because, in my view, I got vaccinated to protect myself. Don't care about anyone else. That was the be-all and end-all. Yeah, that's really tough. You're right on the front line, meeting these people. Occasionally something will come through the media, a story, but it does feel like you're one level removed, obviously. But I haven't been along to any of the protests or anything like that. It just doesn't really interest me, and I'm always wary of people's motivations and drivers and things like that. Yeah. Even if you might agree on certain things, you might have got there. You might get to the same destination, but you've taken a completely different route. That's kind of where we all are at the moment, all us representatives. Yeah. What do you say? Your enemy's enemy is your friend?
Yeah, to be fair, I've never really totally understood that one. For some reason, I can't get my head around it.
So I guess it's for me, as much as I don't agree with all the arguments that everyone else is progressing, because we're all fighting for the same goal, we kind of have a level of respect.
Yeah, I see.
I would never normally associate with these sort of groups or these people,
Yeah.
people with political ideals,
Yeah.
but we are all going for a common goal, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, but there can be a lot of other baggage that comes along, and having to separate that is troublesome, and you just don't know.
It's taken me
how they're
months
gonna
to do
respond.
that, and that's why I also don't go to the protests.
No.
I have taken
Yeah.
a long time to get my profile and my image as separating. A lot of people will say to me, actually, why don't you talk to them? They're super anti-vax. And I said, when I talk to someone, I'm talking to their people. And those people still deserve legal advice. Right? I can have a conversation with people with different opinions.
That's right.
And just because someone has a different opinion that's talking to me doesn't mean that's my opinion. And people don't see that. And the problem is as well is that if we don't have open conversations, it's actually quite ironic. I say to the pro-vaccine, I'm like, look, if we don't have open conversations, you're actually just pushing people further and further down that rabbit hole and isolating them. And that's not helping.
No. And we're never really going to know the full truth if you don't have that conversation. You'll just have a kind of a preconceived idea in your head, or that's when you start making assumptions about the other party.
Or like think anti-vax. That's a huge wrong assumption. Many of my clients are actually completely vaccinated except for this one. I've got people that are vaccinated, like myself, that just don't agree with what's happening. Or then there are people that are saying, I don't want Pfizer, but I'm going to wait for another vaccine or I'm prepared to do. Like jumping everyone into anti-vax.
That's right.
Is just
and that
insane.
potentially that kind of came out of the team of 5 million. It was useful to begin with. Everyone felt like they were on the same page. But we know in reality, you can't have 5 million people all on the same page.
We stayed at home because we had to. It didn't mean that that's necessarily we were all like, this is great, we're going to do. Well, I enjoyed it. I'm a bit of a loner and I like.
I remember, it reminds me of a funny saying, if you have, it's about Jewish people, if you have 2 Jewish people, you have 3 opinions.
I don't think I've heard
I don't know, just throw that out there. But I mean, it's kind of, it highlights the fact that, you need to have a relationship with people. You need to talk to people and find out where they're from, and it doesn't matter what they believe in it's not that it doesn't matter, but
I personally find it as being a level of growth. I personally think that I don't ever know my own opinions if I don't know someone else's. And I say quite often when I'm on social media, I almost never delete comments on my Facebook page unless it's just completely... And that's because I say, look, if I can't respond to you guys on social media, I'm never going to survive in front of a judge.
That's right.
And also, it's that opportunity to get to understand and further develop your own thought process. And so I actually really like talking to people with different opinions because you get a perspective. And I think that's something that people don't get. Like, I'm really happy to talk to people that have completely different opinions to me because it also allows me an opportunity to say why I believe what I believe and to focus that.
And to understand it, to define it and things, and also be open to those different, to be open-minded and to hear those different opinions, because none of us are, I'm not 100% set in my ways. I'm open to change and I'm open to hearing other people's arguments, and I want to hear them because I think it's important.
And you always learn something, right?
I mean, that's the whole idea behind what we're doing now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the podcast in general.
It's just good to talk to different people and whatever they're doing, just getting a different perspective. I just think that's what we all need, is a bit of a growth.
That's right. And understanding that no one holds, truth 100%. I don't know everything, and, I might say something stupid occasionally and I might have to apologise for it later, but that's just being human kind of thing, and not fearing our humanness.
And actually owning up to it, right? That's what people normally get stuck on, is they'll say something and then they defend it. Where if I make a mistake, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not quite what I meant. Whereas, and I'm quite open to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I actually say it's
100%.
So in a that's okay with us 3 sitting here talking. What about in a courtroom? Are you able to sort of say that type of thing? I've never been to court. What happens, Ashleigh? Can you sort of say... I suppose you've got to obviously go in there, you're a lot more prepared, But occasionally, like if say it was an example of so the COVID framework and things like that, is ignorance. I've heard the saying, ignorance is not a sort of, I wouldn't say an excuse, but it's not a something or other. It's not a reason. It's not an acceptable. It's not acceptable. It won't stand up in a court of law.
I guess in a courtroom, though, it's a little bit different, is that, you know, when we first have to put our submissions in, we give our own opening, and that's kind of your like dramatic side. And then it's just talking about the law. The judges will question. Someone once said to me, I always just get really worried about going to court. And they said, Ashleigh, like, this judge is probably so excited about your case because it's something different, and they just want to ask all these questions. The decision they come to at the end, I mean, it's a bit different to that, and a lot of the judges are very sympathetic with that view. My recent Auckland International Airport case that had an interim success, the judge actually wrote, it's my job to do the law. Not in those terms, but he was trying to separate that side because a lot of people also can't separate that feeling from fact, or what I tend to say is ethics from morals. They're two completely different things. And we don't legislate based on morals.
No.
Well, we shouldn't.
Separation of the church and state and all of these other areas. Yeah, you're right.
I'm just concerned, personally, I'm a bit concerned about, I guess, what's going to happen with people and not having that compassionate approach, demonising a group and isolating them and taking away rights, and especially those companies and businesses that aren't under the framework, that are now imposing their own policies. I think that's really horrible. I see public libraries, for example, are saying, well, you've got to have a vaccination to get in, and I'm like, well, that's actually not under the framework. You don't need to impose it.
No.
Or why not do something where you say, well, these few hours a day, let's say, for people that aren't vaccinated? Like, wouldn't that be a more compassionate approach? In my view, anyway, is to give an option, because everyone deserves, I guess, reading, and everyone deserves access, and you pay your rates, and they're there.
Will the unvaccinated receive a rate, like a rebate?
Probably not, if we know what the government's like, but I know a lot of people are asking that question.
Classic. Yeah, that's never going to happen.
No.
That's far out. I can see it's a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, no, personally, it's been very difficult. I've lost a lot of friends, even though I am vaccinated. I've been called an anti-vax. I've been called a white supremacist sympathiser. Like, I'm a Te Pāti Māori voter. I've been said that people have told me I'm killing disabled people, and I'm like, I am disabled. And it's been personally really difficult to deal with all of that backlash. And I know that everyone, and the people that aren't vaccinated, are also dealing with it. But for me, I'm like, I'm also just doing my job, and I'm trying to do it in the best way I can, and I'm trying to be as like proper about it. And yet, some people that I truly thought were close friends, just gone.
Well, that's really sad to hear. But from what I've read, what you've already said about certain things, I mean, I think this is going to make you stronger. I mean, I know that sounds sort of trite, and it sort of takes away from the real, the feeling that you would get from those horrible things happening. But
well, it's doing what's right. At the end of the day, it's what's always driven me. And it's, I mean, even with the first lockdown, when I came out and said, guys, employment law still exists, you can't just pay everyone 80%, everyone told me I was wrong. And then it turned out I was right. And it's just about being a different voice sometimes, and even though it's hard, what I've learned is that I don't know if I really want to be friends with people that are going to take such a hardline approach and not understand me, because the people that do follow my page and my business, they can see it's very authentic and very genuine, and they sort of can see me through and through. And it's actually quite nice to see some of my followers, sometimes they'll support me. So someone will be like, you're just an anti-vax. And so I'm like, no, she's vaccinated. Great. That kind of community is nice.
I think one of the things that I think comes down to is ideologies. And when someone grabs hold of an ideology and they invest in it sort of very heavily,
that's their personality.
It kind of, it's very hard to distinguish between them and the ideology. And I prefer to see the person as, one entity, and then the beliefs and the ideology as sort of something different, but perhaps something that they hold.
And that's why a lot of people didn't understand me.
This iPad doesn't become me when I hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of distinct.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people didn't understand what I was doing from day one. And I was, even when vaccines went out then, I said, I'm going to get vaccinated and this is what I'm doing. And people couldn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. And I'm like, well, it's about justice. It's about giving people representation. And they still didn't understand. It's taken me... It's funny, like originally when I started, I had people commenting on my pages saying, Ashleigh, what you're doing is saying you as an intelligent woman are siding with the anti-vax and you're promoting an unhealthy or way. But now, months later, they're now on my page liking and interacting and actually
so
agreeing
there has been
with
change.
The view. It's been difficult, but...
Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, that would be like saying that a lawyer represents a murderer is condoning... murder or rape or anything like that. I mean, it's just not the case. One
of the big things I've been saying for quite some time is I was disappointed that unions didn't really step up and represent the people, if nothing else, just to help with process. And I always say, look, there was a case back in about 2004 where a union took on Air New Zealand around their drug testing policies. And I've said to these unions, look, that union didn't sit there and wave a flag and say, yay, pro-drugs, we're really happy with drugs in the workplace. They were saying, we actually want to know how these policies interact with our collective agreement and how that impacts the employees.
Yeah.
But they're not, the unions now are like, no, we're pro-vax, like, we're listening to Labour. When they don't even give advice.
Yeah.
And like most of my clients are union members.
So you're hoping for people and organisations that are able to think critically. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Well, and lawyers to take on cases.
That's what I was thinking. It's the critical thinking skills. Like, I mean, I guess it's just easier to go black and white on it.
Well, that's why, like, my right to justice, it kind of throws everyone off because everyone's been talking for so long about the right to refuse medical treatment. And when I was standing in front of the High Court, I said it's smoke and mirrors. Like, we are missing the big one, and that's something we can all agree on, and we should be able to agree that it's important. But it's hard for a lot of people to see that happening because also we don't want it to be happening, right? It's that idea of ignorance where that's a really scary thought.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't impact you, so you don't care. But as I think, I'm going to, if I say who said it, I'm going to get it wrong. But it was an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere.
Right.
And or a threat to justice everywhere. Yeah. Anyway, that to that extent, that if someone's rights are limited, then that is concerning for everyone.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah. Most people talk to me and then they're just like, that was really depressing.
Yeah.
I went and gave a big talk to these business owners and they were asking me these questions, and this was before the framework came out, and I'm like, sorry guys, it's not out yet, like this, and they walked away and it was the weirdest thing. They were like, I really thank you for your honesty and your brutal, blunt approach. We do feel really depressed, but at least we feel like we know. And unfortunately that's kind of a weird part about my job, is I don't make anyone happy, but I at least empower them to have knowledge.
I think, having knowledge is better than just constantly being fed fear, or somehow thinking that fear is, I don't know. Things go completely upside down. Like sometimes I think people might think fear is bravery, or they might think it is something completely different. And we're making a real black and white stand on this thing. But in actual fact, it's kind of coming from a place of perhaps fear or something. I don't know. But they're overcompensating so much so. Yeah. Yeah,
a lot of people don't. I think maybe because I'm also autistic, is people's front emotions I never understand. It's the one behind that I've always been able to understand. Is people sort of that's what I've been able to read. And so when I see people, I'm like that they're not. Like, I'll go and talk to my clients and I'm like, you're not someone that they're making you out to be. You're just scared and you're concerned and you're worried. And some people just want to hand through the process. They're like, actually, I know I'm probably going to be dismissed. I just kind of want someone to take that stress off me and help me through the process.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need. And it's not much to give, and yet not a lot of representatives and lawyers are wanting to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of something we've been told to do, which is be kind.
Right. That's always what I try to push through. It's like, be kind to New Zealand, we have to remember this. You know? And it's all the...
That term has kind of been hijacked though, hasn't it?
Oh, I mean, either way, I guess.
Oh no, I think you should try and win it back.
Yeah.
Bring it back and like a realness to it.
Well, there's always things on media just about people demonising. I think about this recent one with the doctor and Kaya boy, and I kind of stood up and said, I'm not commenting on her medical ethics, but the media should have presented this lawfully and properly and actually given a true story. The minute I say that, they're like, oh, well, you're just saying it's okay. And I said, no, I'm not talking about the medical process. She wasn't giving exemptions. She never said she was giving exemptions. It was certificates. If your laws can't be interpreted in a way that people don't understand the difference, that's not her fault. And it's not for the media then to go and accuse her of things. But people can't separate it.
No.
And that's really difficult. And so at the end of the day, I have to say, she has a family. Be kind. She's getting followed by media. Do those kids, do they deserve that? No, she may not have done everything perfect, but there's a medical council for that. It doesn't have to go on the media. We don't have to smear it. Or if you're going to do a story, pick a whole bunch of doctors so that not one gets singled out.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're doing at the moment. It's just find and attack.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just
Well, people like a witch hunt, and it's good hyperbole for the media.
It'll be businesses soon too. As those businesses that aren't operating, they'll all get called out, and I know that there's a lot of businesses that are terrified of that. And it's not even about the repercussions because they've understood the risks. It's the media side of things that they're concerned about, and being smeared through the mud for maybe just not knowing or not completely understanding the law. And I don't think that's fair, and it's not nice. It's not kind.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about this whole format of having a podcast and things is actually just talking to people, not just getting a little snippet. When you're a business owner in Christchurch that recently had to close down one of his businesses in hospitality, and it was Tom Newfield. He won't probably mind me saying this because it was on the front page of the paper. And when he came in, because it made out that all of the restaurants that he owned were in trouble, and it made out that they had spoken to him, but in actual fact they'd just taken what he had written on Facebook on his business profiles and sort of cut and pasted it and popped it on the front page of the paper, and as a quote. And
that's not right? I think there's a separating from saying what someone does and how it's reported. Two wrongs don't make a right.
No,
and people still deserve it.
Pretty much wrong.
Oh yeah,
completely wrong. It's on the front page of the paper. I mean, Tom just said it's just fish and chip paper tomorrow. Like, who cares? Which is true, but it's just crazy. It's just awful.
Yeah,
it's like that is complete rubbish reporting.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Hey,
I think that's why no one's reading the news now anyway.
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Here's the menu, Ashleigh. Here we are. Look, it's really interesting. I hope that there will be more discussion about how we can do things differently. I like that with the libraries, when you mention the libraries and using the different hours for different sort of certain people, I certainly think that could be implemented with supermarkets, having a period of time when perhaps vulnerable people could go.
Vulnerable works, but technically supermarkets can't close their doors. One thing people are forgetting actually is close proximity businesses, so like hairdressers and people that work in close proximity. You can actually become mobile and go to someone's house to do the work, and so that's not being promoted because...
Oh, I see.
Right.
Because technically the wording is that if you are a close proximity business and you are not vaccinated, you have to refuse entry into your workplace.
Yeah.
But someone else's home can't be maybe your workplace, but you can't refuse someone entry their own home.
No.
And my view is if Parliament intended that to be the case, they better be explicit about it, because if there's going to be any room for interpretation, I'm going to interpret it.
Cool. Well, that's news, which is one day late for me because last night I cut my own hair. And so I could have just invited the hairdresser over for a beer and, hey...
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time.
It's just about getting a little bit creative. I've got a lot of business owners, they'll own, say takeaway, because you can do takeaway without being vaccinated.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, there's some park benches outside, like, do I have to stop people from using them? And I said, well, it depends if it's part of your workplace, right? Because there are some people that have say, food trucks that they don't actually own the land. It's not part of their work.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well...
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's nice. I like that idea of getting a little bit more creative with it.
Yeah, well, you've got to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of levity potentially within the framework.
Yes. The problem is a lot of people don't want to interpret it, and if you read, of course, MBIE, they're not. But I try writing as much as I can on my Facebook and on my blog and put as much information around how you can work around it lawfully but with the least amount of risk. And then also, if you're taking the risk, what else can you do? Because that's a lot of things that no one else is talking about, right? So if you're taking the risk to operate in one of the ways I've said, I said, okay, the next thing is you start mitigating. So if you ever get fined and you want to challenge that to a court, the judge will always consider the mitigating circumstances.
Right.
Have you sought legal advice? Are you asking your, so if you're a hairdresser, are you asking them if they're displaying any COVID flu symptoms? Are you wearing a mask? Is that appropriate? Are you using hand sanitizer? Like, write all this down so that if you do go to a court one day, you say, look, I genuinely thought I was operating lawfully. I've taken all these steps to mitigate risk. It may not be the be-all and it may not save you, but it's just doing what you can.
I might not. They might not have checked all of the boxes, but they certainly had a lot of them. They were going through a process, and they were trying to
being genuine about it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's the difference.
Genuine. That's nice. Yeah,
I've noticed a few times just before we wrap up, we're talking about if two wrongs don't make a right. A lot of this stuff is just impinging on just slowly taking away our freedoms, and that's never going to go anywhere good.
Yeah. Well, that's something too, but people don't understand the long-lasting effects of it. You're like, well, I used to hate the slippery slope argument, but you see it now, right? First of all, they said we're never going to make vaccines mandatory.
Yeah. And
then they put the order out that says we're not making it mandatory. We're just saying that if you don't get vaccinated, you can't get your job. And everyone thought it was only border workers. And then it expanded and expanded. And now we're in a 7th version, and now it's everywhere. There's a point now for me where I can't trust that it'll ever be limited.
Yeah.
And that's concerning because it happens once.
Yeah.
What's the next government going to do?
I don't like to think that way either. I want to remain optimistic that this will never happen, because I've heard the same thing. Once the freedoms get taken away, they never get replaced or they never get brought back. And I always think, no, hopefully not. But it's not.
Generally, people are getting a bit more sophisticated these days about these processes. Like even 30 years ago, people were like, the doctors, if you go to the doctor, they're the authority and all this sort of thing. People are just a bit more thinking a lot better these days.
And more aware of their rights and more aware of avenues to go, more aware of what to do about it. And I think those things help. Like for example, with the doctor, people now know that if you've got a problem with your doctor, you can complain to the Health and Disability Commissioner. Whereas a lot of people, those are things that used to be a little bit more inaccessible, and people are now learning that there are options, and that's kind of empowering. And even if it's not you that challenges something, people are knowing that others are doing it. And I'm trying to show people as well how to follow court cases. I'm teaching them how to go about that, just to give them their own knowledge and go straight to the source. And it may not be the easiest. And someone said to me, because I always give people straight what that information is. So if you can't read it, I've got my own summary, but I'm going to give you where I found it.
Yeah.
Because that's what people deserve. And people are actually starting to learn that. And I think that's great.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks
for coming in, Ashleigh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's very illuminating. And it actually gives me hope as well. Like hearing that you're able to sort of, divide the, whatever it is. I don't know, navigate the kind of, that complex kind of terrain.
Yeah.
Because it is, there are, I mean, I hate to say it, but, they're almost, some people do come across as enemies, and they are trying to take other people out. And it's kind of like, man, what's going on? Like, what's your objective here?
And
like, we should, I want to all be moving forward together, not fighting amongst ourselves. Because the real enemy, obviously, is COVID, right? It's
Government.
not. Well, possibly.
One or the other. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
These are pretty timeless sociological interactions, but based on our contemporary situation.
That's right.
So there's a lot of history and reading about this sort of stuff, of course.
Oh my gosh, my husband's an absolute history buff, and he loves just analysing what's happening in politics, where we're sitting, what's happening,
Yeah.
or some of the arguments around, well, say, for example, somebody will be like, this is what happened in Nazi Germany, and my husband's like, no, this is all, and I was like, you know, we actually do have historic things we can draw on to help us and move in the future, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to just work on a way forward that's going to work for everyone, because we are all New Zealanders, and we need to find a way forward.
Yeah,
we're
that's
never going
right.
to agree on everything. We need,
Yeah.
like, we've always been a democracy, but we need to find on something that's going to help us.
Yeah, that's right. We can't focus on the division. No.
Because that's not going to do anything.
No.
It's like when you're in a marriage, right? If you're just focusing on arguing with each other, you will fix the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Cool. Alrighty. Thanks, Ashleigh.